Well, welcome back to the game. Let's just check in. Anything going on that, let me get out of that light. Any conversation sort of percolating that we ought to talk about before we dive into talking about systems? Anything? You good? Anybody want to give me sort of the tenor of the processing conversation you had after we were done? Any things that bubbled up there?
Figured out your unnamed group earlier.
My unnamed group. I don't know what you're talking about. I claim no responsibility for that. Anything else? We ought to just log in on. Molly, you ready to do a little boxing? You're back in the game? Awesome. Okay, well, for this session, we are, what could be more exciting than talking about systems and structures from 2:30 to 4:30 in the afternoon? Huh? Woo, baby. Okay, so we are going to take a break in the middle somewhere, and we'll get to a stopping point, and then we'll come back. Okay, well, let's just dive right in. I'm going to start with this quote. The declining church always assumes that the solution to youth ministry is programmatic. What kind of church? Declining church. If only they could get a good leader, if only they could find a great curriculum, if only they could renovate a room in a building for youth meetings. They fail to recognize that the solution to youth ministry, like the solution to decline in general, is systemic. This is another way of talking about that just principle, right? We think that the answers all begin with the word just. We're moving beyond. We're moving beyond thinking about what keeps us stuck, and in this session, we're really going to dive into how do we build those systems that will keep that from happening. So here's what I want you to do. This is I got to get your. I know you just sat down, but I want you to get 2 other people with you. So groups of 3. Ideally, not your best friend, but if you want your best friend to be with you, it's okay. Just go ahead and stand up. Get in groups of 2 or 3, and I'll give you your assignment. Okay, here's your mission. I'm going to give you Proverbs 14:4. I'm going to put it up on the screen, and your group is going to have no more than 1 minute to come up with a bumper sticker translation of this verse. Okay? Anybody know Proverbs 14:4? Anybody got that down? Okay, it's probably not one that you sang in Vacation Bible School. Here it is. Without oxen, a stable stays clean, but you need a strong ox for a large harvest. I'll do it again, and then it's. I'm gonna give it to you one more time, and then you're gonna have 60 seconds to translate it to a bumper sticker. Without oxen, a stable stays clean, but you need a strong ox for a large harvest. Go, 60 seconds. Beautiful, baby. That's awesome.
There's a bumper sticker. It's gotta be on the marketing. I don't know what that means.
Okay, let's. We're gonna do a couple little soundings and find out what bubbled up for you. So let's just hear a few samples. Who's got one? Y'all got one?
Yes, not me, but our group thought it'd be great. It said, student ministry colon, shit happens.
Nice. Okay, that was not you. You would not use that kind of language. Ben does use that kind of language. I understand. Yeah. Yeah, okay.
I was trying to get the punctuation right.
I appreciate you bringing the colon. Yeah. A little digestive humor. It keeps coming. Okay. What else? Another one. We need at least two more. Come on. What do you got? Successful ministry is messy. Great. What do y'all have? Go ahead. Either way.
Ladies first.
Okay. No volunteers, no mess, no ministry.
That's great. No volunteers, no mess, no ministry.
Got a lot of things.
Nice. Okay.
Fruitful ministry means having to show some shit.
Okay. Okay. So, yeah, my wife, who is one of the most hilarious humans in the world, she has taken this verse, and one year for Christmas, she put it on pillows for our children. And you know how you do this sort of stamping, of letters? Those of you that do Etsy and Pinterest, you know these things. And so she made a sort of a throw pillow for the living room that says, no crap, no crop. I thought that was pretty nice. That's pretty good. Y'all were close to that? Okay, y'all had something with an equal sign or a mess equals fruit. Nice. So I just want to start with that qualifier. As we're talking about systems, it's easy for us to think, oh, systems are going to make things cleaner. Well, think about a kitchen renovation. It's always messy in the middle. And part of the reasons ministries, initiatives, dreams that we've got for changing the world don't make it is because we're afraid of the mess in the middle. I've often thought there's a business in Nashville to be had called 5,000 Failures. And it would be a music management business. And all you're doing is helping people stay in the game. Because if you stay in the game for 5,000 failures, there's a great chance you're going to make it if you got even a little bit of talent. But most people in Nashville don't make it because they give up at about 2,000 failures, right? If you think about the kitchen renovation, often what happens when you're renovating a kitchen, somebody could come in midway through and they could say, this is worse off than when we started. Yes, that's the way renovations work. If we're going to make a change, we're going to have to deal with some mess. So there are all kind of reasons why churches don't want to step into the messiness of building the dance floor, or what I call squaring the corners, right? You build a house. If you don't square the corners, what happens? Everything's off, and it takes about 10 times longer to do what you're going to do. And so the things we're talking about here are, if you've ever done one of those like Mexico houses or those sort of things, you're responsible for building a building. You know how much progress it feels like when you're nailing things and you're sawing things. Then you get to that point where you get the four walls up and all action stops for about an hour and a half while you square the corners, and there's some way to do it with the thing here, and it's got to match the thing here, and right? And most of us don't have that kind of patience. We just want to get going, right? So that's sort of what we're going to be working on in these two sessions. The metaphor we like to use is the metaphor of the dance floor. So I'm going to tell the story about my daughter, who is a dancer. My daughter just got her master's degree in dance. You probably didn't know you could do that, but yes, she did. So here's a parable about Debbie. Debbie is the child that we call the good one. So Debbie's at Carnegie Hall, and she's having her sort of debut performance. And she is, I just love watching this kid dance. Like most men, I'm not much into dance, but, when she's dancing, it is just riveting. It's unbelievable. So I'm sitting on the front row, I'm watching Debbie dance, and she is leaping and spinning and doing her thing. And finally, she's coming to the finale of her sort of debut performance. And she takes off running over here, and she leaps, and she's up in the air. She's like got airtime. Like, it's like Michael Jordan in a tutu. She just is up there forever. And the whole crowd just sort of collectively is inhaling. Like, this is awesome. And then she lands. And when she lands, you hear a cracking sound. And the rotted wood of the dance floor cracks, and that's not all, because you see pretty quickly that her leg is bent right about here at a 90-degree angle. There's a bone poking out. There's blood spurting everywhere. She's lying on the ground going, and while that happens, the master of ceremonies comes out. And he says, ladies and gentlemen, we want to apologize for this mess. These things with young dancers, they happen like this all the time. And we're going to get the mess cleaned up, and we're going to bring another dancer in real soon. Actually, we got one ready. Let's hear it for our next dancer. And right? Most of us know a dancer in ministry who's no longer dancing because they fell through a rotted dance floor. They knew the steps. They knew how to do ministry, but nobody was tending to the sort of foundational stuff, and then they got blamed for crashing through it. Part of what we want to do with this whole conversation about building infrastructure is not as an end in itself, but because we think it's faithful stewardship of the giftedness of God's people. There are a lot of folks that have just sort of fallen through sideways. So this is what it sort of looks like. You can tell this gal is going to do a lovely triple sow-cow, great skill. I love that clip. But that's the experience. You get the idea? Most youth ministry training is all about the skill of the dancer. And nobody is really tending to this more foundational stuff. And that's what we're going to be doing today. So here's what happens when that happens. So everything sort of upside down pyramids. This is the way most churches think about youth ministry. It's all up to the youth pastor. All the weight of responsibility is on the youth pastor. And it starts with these overwhelming tasks. You got this list of, more than you can possibly do. And so when you got a huge list, an overwhelming pile of work to do, often you enter into the work in a very frantic sort of way, and you go after the first thing on your list when you don't know what to do and you don't have priorities clear. The first thing you do every time you step into your office, here's how you know you don't know your priorities. The first thing you do when you get into your office is you fire up your computer and you check your email. That's how you know you don't know what you're doing. Let me just say that again. No, none of us do that, right? Because when you open your email first thing in the morning, somebody else is going to take your day over. You no longer know what's the most important thing to do because somebody else is going to decide it for you. You answer your email at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, you've already gotten your 1, 2, and 3 top-level priorities done. Then you can go check your email. There's a great little book that I haven't read, but I like the title, Never Answer Email in the Morning. I think there's something to that. But when you're overwhelmed, you'll do stuff that feels comfortable, like I think I'll check my email. I think I got to check my Facebook. What about, I'm sure there's a Twitter thing out there that's tweeting on about I got to check it. Something's trending. Or we'll do things like the first thing on your desk, right there. You got a pile of stuff. You'll just grab the first thing off the pile and start working on that for 30 minutes. When we are driven in this way and everything is designed this way, we are overwhelmed by tasks. And then you come to an event like this. And some yahoo tells you got to have a vision for your ministry. And you add that to your list of tasks. It's one more task to do. So you go steal some vision statement from Saddleback or someplace else, and you plop it on the front of your bulletin, and you have some little fuzzy vision that doesn't really sound like your church, but at least it's done. And then it results in this climate of sort of helplessness and hand-wringing and anxiousness. Now, all of us know people in the church world that are just wound pretty tight, and nobody's going to say yes to that. Nobody will volunteer for that. You kind of that, you don't understand. It's so hard. My life is hard. Yes, it is. Let's just. Scott Peck in his book, The Road Less Traveled, the first line is, life is difficult. And as soon as we embrace the fact that life is difficult, it's not that difficult. But we got to recognize that on the front end, right? So this is what we're trying to avoid, but when we don't have a dance floor in place, this is what we get. Or this. I love this picture. Is that so great? Okay. Now there's a little nuance. Where's my buddy who is the pebble and I'm the boulder? Yeah. What's your name? Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Trey. This I just want to add a complexity like my friend Trey Owens over here would have, right? Now, on the one hand, it's not just up to the youth pastor. I'm going to flip this over and I'm going to say it's all the youth pastor's responsibility. So we're complexifying before we move to simplifying, Trey, right? We start with creating climate. You put the youth pastor, the point leader, up here on top. They are responsible for building all of this beneath them, but they got to get some distance. One of the things that we talk about is this whole notion of balcony time. If you've read Michael Gerber, the E-Myth, you know, part of his language is you work on your business, not just in your business. You work on your ministry, not just in your ministry. So you're up in the balcony, and you're looking at the whole process rather than trying to do everything yourself. So you work on climate first. There's a book called Confidence. It's a book on winning streaks and losing streaks in athletic teams and businesses. And what she identifies these three characteristics of places that have winning streaks. They've got accountability, and it's not just a top-down accountability. So a great athletic team, the team holds each other accountable to do the reps they need to do when they're in the workout room. There's collaboration. It's not just, I'm going to do my thing and who cares about anybody else. And there's also freedom to take initiative. And when you take initiative, what's going to happen? Something maybe. Failure is going to happen. And so you got to create enough space that people are not punished for trying something new that doesn't work, right? So those are three characteristics of climate. You create this, and we're going to, part of our session before we take a break is going to be around how do you change the culture of a ministry. So in a lot of, I've heard some youth workers say, you can't expect me to build a healthy ministry in a toxic culture. Well, what I can do is expect you to build a healthy culture. And you can build an island of viral health in your church, and it will become contagious around the rest of the congregation. People are always attracted to healthy things. They'll be drawn, and people will want to be a part of it. So once you get the climate set, then it's time to work on your vision. Most of us give scant attention to the things that really matter and a whole lot of detailed entanglement in things that don't. So we'll spend a lot of time picking out the right font for some newsletter we're doing, but we'll throw some vision statement together and get impatient when somebody wants to criticize it. Rather than creating a 6-month process for, we're going to draft something, and we're going to float it out to these people, gather their input, we're going to redraft it, right? So we're going to create a clear vision that's got some broad buy-in. And then from that, we can decide our high leverage task. You all probably know the Pareto principle. What's another way to describe the Pareto principle? Anybody know? Yeah, the 80-20 rule, exactly. So the 80-20 rule is 20% of your work produces 80% of your results. 80% of your work produces 20% of your results. Unless we are a treasure hunter and take the time to find that 20%, we're always going to do the 80% first that gets 20% of the results. You want high leverage. You want to do those things that will really leverage your impact. That's focusing on this 20%. And you only do that when you've got a clear vision. So we're really borrowing some language from family systems theory. Anybody got some family systems theory stuff? What names do you know in family systems theory? Anybody? Okay. Sure, I put you on spot. Okay. There's a guy named Ed Friedman who wrote a book called Generation to Generation about 40 years ago. He then wrote a book called Failure of Nerve: Leadership in the Age of the Quick Fix. He actually died before he finished the book. It's a fascinating read. I would say probably one of the top 3 books I've read in the last 10 years. Leadership in the Age of the Quick Fix. The title is Failure of Nerve by Ed Friedman. Now, you got to really enjoy guys who use long sentences and big words and small margins. Sometimes things get a little convoluted, but it is profound stuff. Let me just give you the dummy version of family systems theory. One way to think about family systems theory is like it's like a mobile. Remember when you did those with coat hangers when you're in 3rd grade? You'd tie them all together and you'd pull one thing, and what happens to everything else? It all, you got 6 or 7 things out there, and once you move one thing, everything else moves. Most of us approach the kids we work with as if they are individual strings hanging down and not a mobile. But all of our kids they are reacting to dynamics that are family system dynamics. Which is why if you've worked with folks with addiction or been close to them, you know that often the way we normally react to people with addictions keeps them stuck. So when somebody has an addiction in a family, where does all the focus go? Right to the identified patient, right? All the focus goes here, and we're all trying to coerce that addict to change their behavior. Family systems theory says that's a way to keep things bound and tied up and stuck. If you want to change that person's behavior, change the system dynamics. And when you change the system dynamics, that's your best chance at seeing this person change. What Friedman suggests is that the most powerful stance we can have when we're trying to be what he calls a self-differentiating leader, the most powerful chance we have to change a culture or change an environment is by bringing a non-anxious, playful presence. You know how hard that is when you're having a big debate about, some leaders in the church are saying, I'll tell you what, a church down the street, they're taking all our kids away, and you better get on it. And if you don't, and so you say, okay, which kids are we talking about? And you sort of get sucked into the detail of that, and all of a sudden you get wound up and reactive. You've lost already. I say to parents, here's how you can tell you're losing. If a parent is saying, you were so irresponsible, I cannot believe you did, that's a guarantee that you've lost. Here's how you know you're winning. You say, I'm really sorry that you were 10 minutes late from curfew tonight, but here's the deal. Next weekend, you'll get to hang out with me. This is going to be great. We're going to have a great time. Well, it's going to be like Parcheesi. It's awesome. I've got all these really cool games. We're going to love it, okay? That's the power of this non-anxious, playful presence. There is power there in the buoyancy and the lightness. And if there are times when churches get sucked into this sort of stuck behavior, it's often around ultimate matters, right? I mean, we do as a people have a tradition of killing people that we disagree with. Thumb screws come to mind, right? The Inquisition comes to mind. Those are all things that we did because we were very serious and right. And when you are right, you often end up doing things that can be pretty destructive. I'm gonna show you a clip in this I think it's in this section that'll demonstrate that in a nice way. Let me just identify this little pattern here. When you're stuck, you're going to focus on the content issue, not the system issue. So the content is the topic about which we're having conflict. So give me a content issue in the church, or 5. Okay, we could really be fighting about music. We can say, Jesus played the organ. If it's good enough for Jesus, it's good enough for me. That's what we do. Right? What else would we fight about? Budget. Money, 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 money. Right? We could fight about money like crazy in the church. What else? There's one that's just obvious that we fight about all the time. Yeah, what are we teaching about? Some churches feel like they need to have sort of the sermon police and make sure that the sermons are getting it between the lines and saying exactly what, Jesus was good at saying exactly what people wanted him to say, right? If a sermon you're listening to does not make you go, it might not be in the style of Jesus. Because Jesus would tell these things and people go, what? What? Right? So let me illustrate the difference between content and systems thinking from my marriage. So we had this classic problem as a couple. I was always late coming home from work. So my kids are little, and I would call Susan on the phone that was connected to the wall. Because, there were no cell phones. I know it's hard to imagine there was a time, but there were no cell phones. I pick up the phone. I say, baby, I'm coming home. I'm walking out to the car. What happens? Somebody needs me. One of God's lambs. Right? And what do? I obediently follow the prompting of the Spirit, and I care for this child, this parent, somebody struggling with their marriage. I'm there doing the work of ministry that I was called and equipped to do, loving them in the name of Jesus. It's unbelievable. I mean, I was so unselfish. It was unbelievable. And you would not believe this. So 45 minutes later, I get home. And my wife, pagan that she is, was not grateful for the work of the kingdom that was going on while she was doing some trivia like trying to keep 3 children calm and not feed them, right? And so we settled into this pattern, this system. So we'd have this sort of side order of tension with dinner. We kind of ice baby, and it'd take about 3 or 4 days to get over, which was just enough time for me to do it again. And then we'd have these family meetings, these marriage meetings, where we'd say, what are we going to do about this? And we'd make a plan, like maybe I should leave early or whatever. We'd have these great plans. And but sometimes it'd get a little heated, right? Because I was right. I mean, certainly. And Susan would believe falsely that she was right? She would say things like, hey, if you tell me you're going to do something and you don't do it, that's a lie. And Revelation says liars burn in hell. So you need, so under the, cheap comment, pulling that scripture to argue with her preacher husband is unbelievable. So, but this went on for about 10 years, seriously. And it was the sort of, generally we get along pretty great, but for about 10 years, this was our crack. This was the thing that, we didn't ever talk about divorce. We did talk about homicide a lot. And so one day I'm coming home, same pattern. I'm 45 minutes late. I've led 14 people to Christ in the parking lot. And I'm all excited about it. And I walk in the door, and I got my arguments up, 14 reasons why my wife's an idiot, and I'm ready to share that because I've got this thing planned out. Can't you understand? This is God's work, and I'm serious and into it. Walk in the door, and I don't know if y'all know Greek, but there's a Greek word, ambush. And I walk in the door, and it's like this one-woman intervention. And she just attacks me as soon as I walk in the door. She wraps me up in this big bear hug. She plants a sloppy kiss on me and whispers something flirtatious in my ear. Again, wives, if your husbands are doing this, you have just won, right? So I don't want to, I just figure she can't tell time. I just go, we're going to have dinner, so we have a nice dinner, and it's sort of a really nice dinner, and your kids are happy, and she's happy, and there's not this sort of ice thing. And so then, I'll go to bed, and the next morning I'm leaving, and as I'm leaving, I say, baby, I'm curious, what was that thing that last night? I mean, I liked it. What was that you did? And she's a brilliant family systems theorist without knowing it. She said, I just realized that I was allowing your lateness to control the climate of our home, and that I had a lot of power to change that. And I think it worked pretty good. Now, some people would say, oh, man, she's just, just a doormat. That was a very aggressive move. But it was the sort of the power of playfulness, which is sort of what Jesus did in telling his parables. I mean, he certainly could have been much more direct, but there is a provocative nature of saying things, things coming sort of sideways. There often are, Eugene Peterson in his book, Under the Unpredictable Plant, about Jonah, Eugene Peterson says, some insights are only gained while laughing. Some problems are only solved, particularly marital problems, when there's enough buoyancy in the relationship to solve them. And often in the church, especially a church that's named after elders, in the prodigal son story, the older brother is the Presbyterian brother. Literally in the Greek, it's the Presbyterian brother, the elder brother. We ought to be careful about these matters, right? You get the feel of what we're talking about with family systems theory. We're not saying, let's just go attack this thing. We're saying, if we're going to create a climate, we have to be very deliberate about creating sort of this accountability, collaboration, initiative, but also sort of a spirit of buoyancy and life and non-anxiousness. When we are tied up, you're never going to win the Olympics if you're tight, right? You're never going to win in much of anything if you're tight and wound up. Clarity? Are we okay? Questions? Yeah, wait.
How much practice does it take? I mean, when someone's like criticizing you to your face, my initial reaction is going to be to tense up.
Yeah.
And bow up even possibly. At least internally. How do you do that on the fly?
That's so great. The idea is not that we don't feel anxious, but we own our anxiousness, recognize there's an emotional system involved here, and we recognize that the battle is not against that person, but against my own anxiousness, which is going to get me stuck. And so sometimes we just have to say, wow, thank you. We present non-anxious as much as possible. We never get it right, but we present as much as possible. We say, thanks for that input. And I tell you what, it caught me a little bit off guard. What I'd like to do is process it a bit, and then can I call you in a week and we'll talk about it. But sometimes we just got to get a little bit of distance rather than engaging immediately in the content, because usually criticism has a nugget of truth, but it can often be buried in a in a hush puppy of falsehood. So they have all these things like, well, I've heard there are only 4 kids coming to youth group, and all of those kids are, they're all cussing, and I heard you took a kid to a R-rated movie, and there are all of these stories, right? And rather than trying to pick those apart and correct when you're anxious, you come back with a much clearer, you just don't want to enter into a fight you can't win. And you probably can't win it if you're anxious. And you may have to go get some backup, like a senior pastor, and say, okay, here's the criticism. I'd like to, whatever. So, yeah, does that help?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else, clarity, in terms of this whole family systems theory stuff? Okay. I can't wait.
Again, I don't really know how to ask this question, but and maybe this is, I don't know if this is true for the men in the room. I know maybe the women, especially the single women in the room. I hear you say like playfulness and buoyancy and kind of keeping it light. And one of the things that I kind of have struggled with is this sort of not being interpreted as immaturity.
So good. So good.
And so I'm wondering if you can kind of speak to that of like, how do you balance, this is serious and this is weighty and I think it is, but and that still like don't worry, be happy mentality.
Yeah. Oh, that is, Trey, don't you think that was good?
My name's Kirk Cooper, by the way.
You're Kirk? Okay, good. Well, yeah, I think you have named it really in a profound way, because I do think for women it's really different, or or more difficult to some extent, because there is a potential minimizing of their sort of gravitas, right? And you go to the playful place and they think you're just being silly, like you're kind of a Goldie Hawn, giggly, whatever, right? And so I think there is some care to be had there, and generally you're going to fall off on one side or the other, right? And you can sort of self-manage that. But I think you've named it, because I think there definitely are youth pastors who lose their credibility with the folks who are investing in the ministry because they're too goofy and they're trying to be too silly. So I'm not really saying silliness or flippancy. I'm really talking more about joy. If you remember C.S. Lewis's description of the difference between flippancy, joke, and joy, those are different levels, and they sometimes present similar, but they're really different. But the bottom line is you probably won't get it exactly right. But I think naming that for the women in the room, and for us men to be sensitive to that, it's a much more difficult dance. But Trey's got the answer. Kurt, sorry. Yeah. Well, the fact that you're going to have in any job, but particularly in the church, well-meaning people who talk down to you or see you as less than, that's just, I just want us to crack that up to, that's just the way the game works. And so when I'm saying playful, I'm more saying, wow, I'd never thought about it that way. Let me give some thought to that and get back to you, rather than I'm not suggesting you go for the bozo kind of entertaining, but a lightness and a non-reactivity. I mean, often we'll get fired not because of what we did, but because we can't hear criticism without getting all wound up and tight about it and self-justification. And so the truth is, I'm 56 years old, and I was 56 when I finished in my position. I would say, even though I was older than many of the people that would criticize me and see me as sort of the young guy, I'd been on staff longer than anybody at the church, and I was still seen as the sort of goofy youth guy. That's just part of the. So I would say, wait till you're 50 and then they'll take you seriously. Nah, probably not. But if you're out of youth ministry, there's a good chance they'll take you more seriously. So there's a little trade-off.
I was just going to say, I think your recommendations are not here in advice that you need. When somebody's attacking you, please know you came from that. So the pausing and the revisiting coming back and addressing those nuggets that were there, but also addressing the reality that being kind of sitting into deep hurts.
Yeah.
I don't know. I found that to be really effective.
Yeah.
Letting other people know that they're important.
Yeah.
That shows a level of maturity and seriousness that you're approaching.
That does win you some respect. Yeah, no kidding.
I was going to say, there's also, showing the adult side of it too, Mike. I've never thought about it the way you talked about it, but there have been some times where I've said I need to get back to you, but actually setting a time to get back to you.
Yeah.
Saying, all right, let's have lunch this day, this time.
Yeah.
I will have an answer for you by then.
Yeah.
That shows the maturity side of it.
Right. Right. Yeah. And the truth is, we are, St. John of the Cross. God only uses the frail instrumentality of each other. We are all going to be doing things that deserve criticism. And so the more we can say, wow, thank you. I have one person in particular at our church I refer to as my loyal opponent. She would take a bullet for me any day, but she will also shoot bullets at me all day long. Right? And so when she speaks, I don't have to agree with her, but I recognize the heart that she's coming from, right? And being able to say, yeah, there's a good chance there's a blind spot here that I need to be tending to, and I'm missing some things. Sure. But part of the deal is just not being surprised by the fact that criticism is going to come. And the nature of youth ministry is that parents are horribly anxious about their failures with their own children. And they are so wound up and they're so worried. And they're looking for any place they can go to. And you know that rule about when you're trying to save somebody who's drowning? Be careful, because they might kill you. So they're flailing. A lot of times parents are just flailing, and they've got all this anxiety about their kids. And for us to be the ones that take a little breath and let them do their thing, even if they're sort of venting at us. And then we come back and can address it if need be. Yeah, so thank you for that. I think you all have really added a nice texture to that conversation. So here in Philippians 4, 2 and 4, 4, 2 to 4, 2 and 3. Anybody know what Philippians 4:4 says? Yeah, rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice. Did y'all know that came after this? This is great family systems theory. I plead with Eodia and I plead with Syntyche. Get a new name. Agree with each other. Can you imagine the playground for Syntyche? Sheila. To agree with each other in the Lord. What's the subtext? It's a church fight. Women in the church fighting. Never heard of it. It's an ancient thing, right? And he says, help them, da-da-da. But then he never identifies what the content issue is. Look through this a million times. You'll never see the content. What he does say is, rejoice in the Lord always. Were you confused? Let me say it again. Rejoice. You want to deal with this conflict? Don't try to sort out who's right or wrong. Don't try to get Judge Wapner, People's Court, to come figure this thing out. Just rejoice in the Lord. You got to create some level of buoyancy before the problem can get solved. Again, all we're doing is trying to frame our conversation about creating a dance floor, because you can create all the right infrastructure. And then you can have someone running it that really destroys the culture. So they call you and they say, Andy, is that right? Andy, you call yourself a Christian and you have not given me your attendance from the small group from last week. How do you expect me to manage this ministry when you don't give me your freaking attendance? Right? Now, you think I'm exaggerating. You all know people in the church that talk like that. You're supposed to have your article in for the newsletter, and it is not in right? There's the communications czar. All of the... Right. Anyway, not that I have any personal experience with any of those things. Is this being videotaped? I think it is. Okay, be more careful. There are two components of sustainability. The architecture piece is much more... it's much more concrete, and you can get it. I'm going to give you some of the key pieces of building architecture in the church, in your ministry, and just kind of the building the dance floor. It's anything you can hold in your hand. So job descriptions, goals, organizational charts, game plans, directories, curriculum plans, any of those sort of things. That's all important stuff, but it's secondary to what I call alchemy or climate or culture. And so in this next little section, I want to identify 4 steps to transform a culture. And I'm going to walk you through a process, and ideally I'm going to get a case study from one of y'all, walk through a process that can actually transform a culture. All right? Now, to do that, I need to make a little bit of a distinction about what I'm talking about when I'm talking about culture. I'm really talking about the feel of a room. You all have been, you've been to camp, and you've seen, when the kids are just into it, like they're singing, and they're doing the thing, and their, emotions and all that, and you do the very same song at your ministry, and they're like, right? That's a climate thing. They smell, it's like there are pheromones in the air, and they smell the message, we don't do this. We're not doing this today. or we're getting crazy today. But that's a climate issue. It's sort of unspoken, and you can't direct it as in, okay, y'all get excited. Everybody get into it. Let's go, baby. No. Can't imagine why y'all didn't jump right into that party. So let me illustrate for you. I want you to stand up. And this is a little greeting exercise, a little hospitality exercise. I want you to walk around the room, and I want you to greet people, but every person you greet, I want you to greet them as if there was somebody more important you were trying to get to. You understand the instructions? Okay, go. Say hi to people. Okay, freeze right where you are. Freeze right there. I want you to freeze. Okay. Now, this time, same exercise. It's a greeting exercise, but this time you're greeting in a slightly different way. This time, the person you're greeting is your best friend, and they have been in a POW camp in Afghanistan. They just got off the airplane, and you're seeing them for the first time in 3 years. You have been taking care of their child since the child was 3 weeks old. And so they're coming down the escalator into baggage claim, and you see them for the first time. Greet them. Okay, sit down. Go back to your seats. Go back to your seats. Wow. You never really know what's going to happen with a group of, reformed youth workers. And that could have really gone poorly. What did you notice about the difference between those two experiences? Okay, one was much more uncomfortable. And I'm guessing the second one, right? Yeah. Somebody's touching me. He's touching me. Okay. Yeah, there was a level of risk and emotionality even in pretending, right? Okay, great. What else? It was contagious. They were sort of a wild... this group over here would not let each other go. They were just hugging in the aisle, and then people would join, and more people would... It was like a pile on. It was unbelievable. Okay, what else? Okay, there was a little bit of a coldness to the first one. Which one felt more like Sunday morning? Yeah, doesn't it? Hey, how you doing, Bob? Good to see you. I'm praying for your mama. Whatever. Yeah, right? Just that's the kind of the Sunday morning, right? Which one was faster? Isn't that interesting? Normally we equate speed with energy. But in this case, it was the slowing down, the stepping into the awkward place. There's always, when I give that instruction, there's a beat before anybody actually tries. Is this real? And then one wacko does it, and the rest of the group says, okay, I guess it's okay. Somebody's wrapping their leg around somebody. It was hilarious, right? Now, the hilarious thing is you guys knew that we were pretending. You guys knew that I was manipulating you into doing this, and it still changed the feel of the room. You could really feel the difference between those two experiences. I'm just suggesting that you have the power to architect culture in the same way. You have the power to change the climate, but it doesn't happen because we tell people to feel something differently, but we can create an environment of receptivity, an environment of energy and openness. There is something about, I love that we started with the awkwardness. There is something about eyeball to eyeball that really is uncomfortable, right? There's a point at which we go, please stop looking at me, right? But there's also something quite energizing about that. So you're getting the feel, the difference between alchemy and architecture. So we're going to do alchemy first. This is the image I use. In youth ministry, you're an environmental architect, so it's like building a greenhouse. So it's structural, you're building, but it's climate. There's something happening. You're going to change the climate inside because of what you built. You with me on how those sort of interplay? You spend very little time worrying about the climate outside, about things you can't control, like busy kids, complaining parents, demanding senior pastors, criticizing elders, whatever. We don't worry about those things because we're building this climate that we actually have quite a bit of control over what happens inside that greenhouse. Right? So here are there are 4 steps to this process. It's very fun. And so can somebody give me a case study of a culture change you would like to see in your church? And we're just going to play with that case study through these 4 steps. Yeah.
We have been this way for years about who teaches it. We have a high school Sunday school class where if somebody answers whoever's teaching this question or speaks up, then other kids look like, no, we don't do that.
Yeah.
We don't do that. We don't
Okay.
talk.
Okay.
We stonewall. Everybody wants to.
And that's part of the
Dynamic.
the culture in that room.
That's the culture. It's definitely the culture.
Okay, awesome, great. Okay, we're going to play. Is that okay? Can we use that one? Okay, so what we'd like to do is move from being a culture where kids stonewall the teacher and won't answer questions to a place where it's alive and proactive and interesting. And kids are engaging. Teacher can ask a question, and 5 or 6 people go, oh, can I? Well, I was thinking, I'm not sure I agree, right? You want to create this sort of kinetic energy in a room, and it's not just give me a lecture and sit and take notes. Great, love it. So step number 1 is you're going to trust the process. Trusting the process means that you're just going to relax a little bit. You don't have to make this thing happen immediately. Now, is anybody here a bamboo farmer? Yeah? Yeah? No. So here I have done some research on bamboo plants, and bamboos, and it's actually looked it up on the internet, so it has to be true. So here's what I've learned about bamboo. If you go to your friendly neighborhood bamboo store and you plant a little bamboo plant, a little starter plant, do you know what you have in 6 months? You still have the same little bamboo plant. You got nothing. There's no green. It's just little bamboo sticks not doing a thing. You're thinking, man, I must have some bad bamboo. Well, you go a year. You know what you got? You still got a little bamboo plant. Nothing. Just little bamboo sticks. No change, no green, no nothing. Just bamboo sticks. Okay. You go 2 years. 2 years. You come back to your bamboo plant. You're thinking, wait a second. The Baptists, they got bamboo everywhere. How come I can't get bamboo? And, well, you got the same thing. Nothing. 3 years, in the fullness of time, something goes off in the little bamboo plant's brain. And it says, it's time. After 3 years, it can grow, got to be true on the internet. It can grow as much as 4 feet in 24 hours. In one day, go from here to here. Unbelievable. When you understand how bamboo grows, you don't fret. You don't worry about the fact that it hadn't grown. It's like a junior high boy. Right? When you know that the chance of this kid having sort of like a Paul on the road to Damascus conversion experience at 14 years old is probably not going to happen, we can relax a little bit. Let me tell you, in God's economy, as I've observed it in terms of kids' transformation. So you get this kid, 7th grade boy, comes in the youth group. He's like snarly. He's exactly the stonewaller. He's like, if anybody talks in here, I'm going to, give him a snarl and negative. We're praying our brains out about this kid. Praying for when we go to camp and pray for this kid to really hear the gospel. Man, the kid, raises his hand at the end of a talk. And you're going, yeah, this could be the place where the Spirit comes in. When are we playing kickball? When are we playing capture the flag? Are we doing any German spotlight tonight? Right? So next year goes by, you're praying for this kid, and you're just trying to be so intent. He's in your little small group, and he's just like such a detractor, but you really believe that God's at work in this kid. And a year goes by, nothing happens, and it's time for camp again. You think, no, nothing happens. Well, about 3 or 4 years into this, the kid comes to you and says, hey, I got to talk to you about something. He sits down with you and says, I just want you to know I'm a Christian now. Really, what happened? Well, I went to this other church. And I never, it's amazing. I never heard the gospel before until I was at this camp. And right? And if you understand that's sort of in God's economy, the way transformation happens, we sort of relax and we trust the process. As you're trusting the process, you can telescope what's going to happen. So let's use your case study. So in the process, you go, you know what's hilarious? You just saying this to yourself or the other leaders. What's hilarious is that the kids in here think that they can win. It is just hilarious. And, we're gonna turn this thing around. It may take a couple years. We're definitely turning this thing around. And there's just sort of a relaxing, but, the first step in that process, if I'm teaching the Sunday school classes, I never ask a question. I can put them in pairs, or I can, get them to experience something, or we'll watch it. But actually saying, and, we pass the book around the room so the dyslexic kids feel uncomfortable, and they all read a verse, and then we say, and how does that apply to our lives? I will never do that because I know what happens in this class. I know that I'm going to get a stonewall when I do this. I think I will stop doing that. I'll do something else. But I'm not expecting immediate change. I just know it's going to happen. We're going to turn this thing around. When our pastor, who's been there now about 12 years, came to our church, it was just awesome. He, in his first address kind of to the whole congregation, not a sermon, but we had a congregational dinner, he said, I just want to let you all know that we're going to be the most generous church in the state of Tennessee. Just want y'all to know. And people think, oh, isn't that nice, isn't that nice? But no, he pretty well made good on that. Doubled our mission giving, by 6 or 7 figures. I mean, it was unbelievable, the kind of stuff he did. But he just was able to say, that's what we're going to do. You don't know it now, but we're going to do that. So we're beginning just with this stance of non-anxiousness. And it's, I've telescoped this to you a little bit about recruiting volunteers. I'm giving you the bet, $100 bet. Here's a process. You'll get all the volunteers you want if you work this process. I'm just so sure it'll work. It'll work. So I can trust the process. I don't have to say do this or do that. Just trust me. This is going to work. The next one is you got to deliver some results. Now, those of you that have been in Nashville for a while, remember a time when the Tennessee Titans were a football team. And we had one year where we were 13-0. And then I think lost in the first round of the playoffs. But we were 13-0 that year. And then the next year we were 0-6. The difference in the feel of our city was dramatic. In this year, by the third or fourth game, everybody was using first-person personal pronouns around the Titans. Right? What am I saying? Yeah, we're doing great, aren't we? How about our Titans? How about my Vince Young? How about my Pac-Man Jones? How about all those people who got kicked off the team? There was just this sense of, whoa, there's this buoyancy because something's happening. The next year, we no longer use first-person personal pronouns. By the third or fourth game, it was they, those, jerks, right? When a church feels like they are moving forward, there is an energy that comes with that. Now, here's the great news, y'all. Often, we think, oh, man, I'm at a disadvantage. How do you know if you're winning in ministry? I mean, it's not just about counting heads. How do you know if you're winning? Here's the great thing. In football, it's just all about points. In basketball, it's about, points. In soccer, it's about goals. In ministry, you just take out your bow and arrow, like Katniss, and you shoot it, and then you draw a bullseye wherever it lands, and you throw a party. You better believe that the Spirit of God is at work in your ministry. Something's happening. Just point to the thing that's happening. It doesn't have to be like, oh, we had this strategic plan and ergo we did it. No, you just recognize that something's happening. So let's go to, what's your name? Brad. Okay, Brad, let's go to Brad's story. In this story, here are the things that happen. You got 15 kids in this class. Ordinarily, there's one girl named Hermione that raises her hands, but basically everybody else is just, stonewall, right? And they're like, oh yeah, like teacher's pet. And so one week, a kid says something funny in class, just to be a smart aleck, and all the rest of the kids laugh about it. And you go, look at our class, we're sharing. Look at everybody's in the game. People are talking. I love it when people talk. You can identify any place where, let's just say, you do an exercise where you do a wagon wheel. Y'all ever done wagon wheel where one group in the middle, another group on the outside, everybody's paired up, you do 30-second questions, and they just rotate. It's like speed dating. They just rotate around the group, right? So you do a little speed dating thing, and you get around the group, and they've had 6 or 7 30-second conversations. All of a sudden, look at us. You don't have to talk about it. You just are letting something happen, and people feel like, well, that felt different. Actually, I kind of like that better than this stonewally thing. Nobody's going to say that out loud, but you're just delivering a little bit of results. You're just unsticking the lug nuts. Something is starting to change a little bit. Then the next thing is you got to embrace some stories and metaphors. Here's the rule about kids and actually about humans. We often overhear better than we hear. Somebody want to give me an interpretation of that? We often overhear better than we hear. Anyone? Bueller? Are y'all snowballing me? Kurt, talk to me.
Do we make it more complicated than it needs to be?
Sure, that's sure a part of it.
Try to hear things that they're saying that they're not really saying instead of hearing what they're actually saying.
Yeah, there you go. That's great. Good. Yeah.
We always want to be on the inner circle. We feel like we're outside, so we can listen to the inner circle.
Okay, that's great. Yeah.
Does that mean like Eve in the garden, she adds to what God is?
Sort of hearing over more than is actually there. Okay, that's great. Yeah. I'm glad. Thank you for raising your hand.
Listening to other people's conversations and kind of what they're saying, hear more than listen to what they say.
Let me kind of play with that a little bit. So imagine around the dinner table, I hear a lot of parents say, how do I get my kid to share at the dinner table? How do I get them to talk, their teenager? How do I get them to talk at the dinner table? Let me tell you, if Susan and I are just talking, my teenagers will interrupt, right? All we have to do is talk about something. They can listen in. We don't have to say, we think y'all should pray more often. We can just say, wow, I would love for us to pray tonight. I'm talking to Susan. The Johnsons, they just got that diagnosis about pancreatic cancer. Did you go out? Yeah, I went by the hospital. Yeah, she's not doing great. So when we do our blessing tonight, let's pray. So I'm not saying that to the kids. They're overhearing this conversation. Often formation happens when they're overhearing something that's rather than a direct assault. Right? Stories and metaphors are a way, Jesus, of course, did a great job with this, are a way of communicating more than just a direct message. Let me give you a great example. Anybody know the name Mark Schultz? Do y'all know that name? He's a Christian musician. But Mark was a youth director for us for about 7 years. So Mark would write songs every year for Youth Sunday, and the kids would sing them on Youth Sunday. And now you got to understand our church. We are incredibly formal. And somebody, I watched, there was one time over the 28 years that I was there, somebody had a spiritual experience. Here's what it looked like. There's just not a lot of physicality going on in our little church. My first Sunday, I was doing the opening prayer, doing the liturgy at the beginning. I got in the pulpit and I said, let's pray together. I led the congregation in prayer. After the service was over, the pastor made a beeline for me, and he said, Mark, I can't let you use contractions in worship anymore. I'm thinking, I wasn't having a baby. What are we talking about? No, we say, let us pray. Right? You get formal? Contemporary music is anything written after the Civil War. Right? So pretty dang formal. Well, so Youth Sunday, there's usually a little attitude. But Schultz had this song. If you know Schultz's music, it's usually a ballad of some kind, and there's, usually somebody's a nursing home, and there's, somebody's dying, and you usually cry by the time it's over. So he wanted to do something that had a little kick to it. So he got the kids up on the steps, and he taught them this liturgical move called stepping and swaying. And, it goes like just kind of a little bit like this. Now, you got to understand, in my church, this is like speaking in tongues. This is like snake handling. I mean, it is way out there to do this. And so Schultz has got the kids singing, and there was one point at which they were supposed to start clapping. And I'm thinking, whew. And so this was that one Sunday where the kids were really into it. And I had some seniors on the back row just kind of giving it this. And then I had these, how sometimes kids don't come dressed for church? So like they're a little low, or they're a little high, or they're a little low. And I had these little 7th grade girls on the front row who were taking dance. And they had just learned this move. And I was thinking, relocation is in my future. It's coming, right? And so I go to the door, stand there at the enjoyed it line. Y'all have enjoyed it lines at your church? Where they come by the pastor and say, enjoyed it? Enjoyed it? Yeah. And so people are coming out, and they're, very sweet, but, you can tell it wasn't everybody's cup of tea. Then I see out of the corner of my eye, there's this woman whose husband I had buried about 3 years before. And I knew her very well. I knew her well enough to know that this was not going to be something she was excited about. So she comes up to the line, and I say, well, I guess that's not something you see very often, is it? Best defense is good offense, right? And she reaches over and squeezes my arm, and she says, no, honey, but I hope it happens again real soon. Well, that story, I've told my church dozens of times. I say to them, this is the kind of place this is. And just like children, congregations live into the stories that get told about them. When I'm doing a baptism, I'm walking down the aisle, I want the congregation to overhear. So I'll take the child, and I'll say, Susie, as you're growing up, Mr. Andy has already stood up and said he'd be your Sunday school teacher. Thank you. Yeah. And the congregation giggles a little bit, but they overhear. There's a little story there. When we've done our assessment work, we often will ask people to describe their ministries. We'll say, what's your youth group like? 2 come to mind. One of them said, we're like a patchwork quilt made by a blind person. Another one was, it's like Death Eaters have come and sucked the life out of our group. Okay? The stories we tell, whether they are literal stories or just metaphors, that predicts the future. Here's the deal. You are the bard of your ministry. You get to sing to them the story of their identity. And by the songs you choose to sing and the stories you choose to tell, that is the trajectory they're going to live into. Now, here's a story in the bulletin. Attention, all youth and parents. We have canceled youth group for the time being because nobody has volunteered to help. Until we get volunteers, this is all in bold, until we get volunteers, we will not have Sunday night youth group, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. Thank you for your support. Right? That's the way some people think they're going to get volunteers. But the truth is, that is telescoping a story the meaning of which is this church doesn't care about kids. Nobody in here wants to sign up and be with teenagers. And this is a lousy place. If you have teenagers, you need to go find another church. That's the message, right? So, we're going back to your story. It's the next week after you've done the wagon wheel, right? And during that week, you have called 3 or 4 of the parents of these kids and just said, I just want you to know, it is a delight to have Bubba in our group. Let me tell you what happened last week. I just watched and we were talking and he just was leaning in and listening. It was just awesome. Well, basically 1 out of 1 parent likes to hear good news about their kids. And basically 1 out of 1 parent doesn't very often. And so just finding ways to memorialize that in stories. Also for the kids to hear, a volunteer comes in or you got a new Sunday school teacher that comes in to help. You say, let me tell you about this class. This past week we did so-and-so and so-and-so. It was pretty awesome. Now there are some pretty brilliant people in here. So-and-so usually gives the brilliant answer. So-and-so usually gives the artistic answer. This one over here is just like the comedian of the group. And but you're not talking to the kids and saying, hey, try to be better, try to be lighter, try to talk more. You're just creating an environment. You're really building an ecosystem where change feels right. Because they're getting a payoff for not participating. You just want to create a little payoff. And somewhere in that process, you're having some one-on-ones or you're going to a game or you're sending a note, but you're having some conversation with a kid and you just say, man, sometimes I'm dying in that class and I feel like I'm hanging out there and you step up and you always, have a way of stepping in. And when you say something, it gets everybody else involved. It's awesome. You're just identifying ways to celebrate a little progress with the class. And we just got to trust that the Spirit of God is at work. We just got to be attentive to that. And we're going to memorialize the stories of what we want rather than the stories of what we don't want. The stories of what we don't want are much more entertaining sometimes, right? To talk about I asked a question and, they stared me through the ground and I just wanted to fall on the ground, melt on the ground. So we're just memorializing things with stories and metaphors. So you might say, it feels like when we started hanging out together, so it's the end of the year, you're doing the end of the year Sunday school class, and you're just doing your last sort of 5-minute, look back on the year, and maybe it's slides or maybe it's stories, but you're just saying, I remember. Maybe you let the kids do an I remember, but you say, it's like over this past year, we were like the 0-12 team, and it feels like we're going to the Super Bowl. I mean, the way you guys have come together, it's just unbelievable. So it's that sort of giving attention to what God is doing and recognizing it's going to be like a 3-year process. But ultimately, my experience is very few kids can withstand the relentless power of unconditional love. They crack. And if we'll just create an incubator for that to happen, it'll tend to happen. Now, here's the last one. And then we're going to take a little break. We want to embrace rituals and traditions. So we've got stories and metaphors, but we also can, if we want to lock in these changes, we can do rituals and traditions. So we'll come back to our Sunday school class. So you're finishing up the year. We always, the last Sunday of the year, we do this, whatever it is. For anybody that's been a part of the class, they're invited over to the senior pastor's house, and the senior pastor makes pancakes and serves us, right? Whatever. You have some sort of tradition. It doesn't have to be loaded with a lot of heavy meaning. In fact, naming traditions that they come up with on their own often solidifies a sort of buoyant culture. So do any of you all have nutty traditions, unexplainable traditions in your ministry? What you got, Kurt?
We got a little weird.
Come on.
This is before me. But
Yeah, well, it's not you. No, it was Trey that did that one. Yeah.
I don't know It's so weird. Anyway, and so then when they figure out if they clap, we'll clap, and then they point to the next person. So that's like a.
And the kid that the
They
kid
beg to do it at everything that we do.
and the kid that hates it the most becomes the biggest champion of it. Oh yeah, we got to do it.
This last year at RYM, we had a kid that he was almost in tears because he didn't want to do it, and I just told him, I beg you to do it, and now he has not stopped talking about it.
Yeah, yeah. Let's just name that. There's nothing spiritual about that, which is probably true for so much of what you do, right? I mean, you and I are soulmates, baby. In my little youth group in Waco, Texas. So I grew up in Waco, which is the home of Baylor, and Baylor is the largest Baptist university in the world. And it's right. You did Sic 'em Bears right there. I saw it. That was awesome. Did you go to Baylor? Oh, but you know Sic 'em Bears. Well, it's a good thing to know. All of you should know. Hey, Sic 'em Bears. It could change your life. So, there I am in Waco. We're at a little Presbyterian church, about 100 people. So 6 or 8 of us in the youth group. And so we'd hire a part-time Baptist to be our youth director. Well, I mean, they were full-time Baptists, but they were like working part-time at the church. But I was sort of proud of the fact that I would run off every part-time Baptist. I mean, our group would. Nobody stayed more than 6 months, right? And we would have to have George Holland. Y'all know George? Oh, maybe not. George was our pastor. He took over the youth group, at least half of the year, usually more. And George's favorite expression was, Okay, that's George. And our tradition in our youth group, nobody ever said it. There's no initiation to this deal. But we spoke British when we were together, because it is Waco after all. And so we'd get together for a youth group, and we'd say, what we're having for snack supper? I don't know. How about, I love tacos. Those the sprinklies. I love the sprinkly cheese. And we have hot, how about the hot sauce? It's a little bit too hot. Right, that was our, I don't know why we did this, but we always spoke British. And we called George by his Spanish name, Jorge, right? So every Sunday morning when George was done preaching, all 8 of us would go to the door, shake his hand and say, lovely sermon, Jorge. I don't know why. It's just kind of part of the group. George, I remember 2 sermons George ever preached. One of them, I'm in 8th grade. Connie Caperton is in 7th grade. We're kind of sweet on each other. Connie denies it to this day, but it's true. I was sitting over here. Connie's sitting over here. Pews like this, and so we're kind of making eyes at each other all during the service. And George is preaching along, and George is a pretty mild-mannered dude. And George points right at me, and he says, Mark! Now, have any of y'all been called out by name in church? Yeah, you know that feeling? It's the reason you wear plastic pants to worship from now on, right? So he's pointing at me, and I don't know the appropriate response. Do I stand up? Do I, yes, sir, stop looking at Connie? I didn't know what I was supposed to do. And time passes very slowly in moments like that. About a second and a half later, now I have already thought through 16 things I ought to try to do, but I couldn't think of anything that was a good choice. And so he looks over here, and he says, my words. Mark my words. So that's the first sermon I remember. Here's the next one. I got to find some paper. Well, I'll just fake it. Anybody got some paper I can borrow? So George is preaching along. I need one more. George is preaching along. And as he's preaching along, you know how sometimes pastors have trouble landing their jet? Yes. You know they're done. They know they're done. They just can't finish. They can't get that thing down. And it's like, the elder board's on the front row. Bring it in, Bob. Come on, bring that thing down. Come on, here we go. And so George knows he's having trouble landing this thing, and he's got his notes in front of him, yellow legal pad, handwritten, black magic marker, black, what do you call it? Black Sharpie, right? And so So George is preaching along, and you can tell he can't end this thing. So finally he just says, okay, y'all, just to sum up, there's just one thing I want you to get today. For a full 60 seconds, George is looking at his manuscript. And it's radio silence. Never have the saints of Central been more hungry for the word. George's got little beads of sweat right here, little beads of sweat right here. Hey, we're all going, come on, Jorge, come on, baby. And finally, isn't it funny what you remember? I don't remember any of his sermons, but I do remember this. George is one of those chocolate bunny all the way through kind of guys. You know what I'm talking about? Like what you see on the outside, it's all the way through. It's not like a hollow little, no, it's not. George is George all the way through. George, with this expression of integrity, holds up his thing, and he says, y'all, I got no idea what this says. Oh, love that boy. George turned 80, and they threw a surprise birthday party for him in Austin, Texas. And so I came to surprise him and tell these stories on him. And he was just crying, laughing. He said to me, I got one more George story, because he said this is what he brought up. So he takes us to Padre Island, which is about 5 hours away. This is before child protection policies. There are teenagers driving their cars with all of our friends. And so we're driving down 5 hours to the beach. And George is he's our chaperone, because the part-time Baptist has quit. And so we come back from the beach, and all I remember is George is ready to get home. He's got a sunburn right about here, and he's just ready to get home. And so as we're driving home, it's George and then all these teenager cars following behind George. And all of a sudden, woo, the police pulled George over for speeding. We go, bring all 4 cars over behind him. We all pull out our Instamatic cameras. And we jump out of the car. George is talking to the policeman. Jorge, what seems to be the problem? And George said for 2 years after that, he could not get the picture off the bulletin board. Like, he would take it down, and the next week it'd be right back up on the bulletin board. Anyway, so all that's to say, there's some of our rituals that are so webbed with meaning. Let's do those. So whether it's baptism or confirmation or a senior banquet, they're traditions that are full of meaning. When we commission our volunteers, when we commission our kids to do mission trips, absolutely. But sometimes the thing that sort of creates a culture is when they have created a norm for themselves. They've created some sort of unique little pattern for themselves. So we're back to our Sunday school class. Maybe there's a little closing that you always do together. Maybe there's something that bubbles up, or you're able to talk about when you introduce a new person comes to class. A few things you need to know about this group. Number one, whenever a new person is here, we give them canned meat. Here's your canned meat. Welcome to the party. Number two, whatever the things are, this is also a group you need to know always does so-and-so. Again, you're letting the group overhear your perception of how fabulous they are, or how whatever they are, okay? So that kind of walks you through this process of sort of changing culture. Usually it's a 3-year process. So don't get freaked out when it doesn't happen immediately. But if you target something you want to see changed, then typically you work this process, it'll happen. In fact, I have a gift to illustrate this for somebody who's been in ministry the shortest amount of time. Can we just figure that out? Anybody been here less than 6 months? Been in ministry less than 6 months? Anybody less than a year? Anybody less than 2 years? Serious? Okay, how long? How long? Anybody less than a year and a half? No? 17 months. Oh, yeah, you were 17 months? Okay. I think it may be you, Adam. So what I have for you is this, we're creating this series of books called called 30-Day Change. And the idea is if you will focus on like a boot camp for 30 days on a particular thing, you can move the needle in that area, which will have the impact of creating some momentum and changing your entire ministry. So this first book that we've done is around recruiting volunteers, and it's because I love you, Adam. It's just for you because it's gonna change your life, I'm sure. So we're gonna take a break. It is that went longer than you expected. We're going to let's do about a 10-minute break, and then we'll have about 15 minutes to do some architecture things, and then I'm gonna kick you out. 10 minutes. Go.